Hello everyone, welcome back to another Disney movie, and this time let's go back to kind of the basic most of the time. After Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and Pinocchio, Disney decided to up the ante big time. It was still 1940 was a period where cinema was still growing. Color and sounds were still relatively new, people were getting used to them. And Disney wanted to give animation a bigger purpose. Up until this point, animation was mostly viewed as just kids stuff, obviously,
Well,
with the old cartoons and all like that.
I
Disney
think
wanted to give a different meaning to it,
the
and
best term you could to use in this particular historical context here is more like a comedy kind of thing
yeah,
rather than because
rather than being
cartoons were
Lighthearted, at
never
least.
cartoon shorts at this point in time were never made for kids. There was smoking, there was racism.
They were
Like,
made for
uh,
propaganda, for goodness
Okay,
sake.
okay, okay. I think
propaganda.
the best
No,
way
sheer,
to do...
surprising enough, sheer propaganda started kind of right after this, but it's gonna be a topic for a usual another day.
Sure.
The point being, Disney decided to bet on a different kind of thing. People were not
basically make
Hold
an
on.
artsy fartsy movie. Yeah.
well, not just like that. People were not just going to cinemas or theaters, but they were also going to concerts to listen to famous composers. As such, Disney wanted to put music into animation sometimes in the most literal possible sense of a way. Basically, this is the ancestors of modern day video clips. Basically, when you get down to it, this is called Fantasia. There was originally a attempted title called the concert feature, but no one in the studio liked it, and they quickly thought of another one, calling Fantasia, which was musical themed. You wanted to say something, Java?
Yeah, essentially, yes. We are looking here at the most upscaled Blu-ray edition version.
Yeah.
Fantasia, as Tio has said, was essentially them putting music to the big screen. And in this version here, you'll have everything. The uncensored bits, the orchestra sections, the part where the conductor
The
explains
only
bits.
thing that hasn't changed, basically, after because that's you have to understand, people. A lot of cuts of this movie were made, but after the 60s, I think they did a specific change that has not been retconned yet, due to involving some minor racism in one of the segments. So basically, that's what we're also sticking to it. In fact, honestly, the only way you get to get the original uncensored version, it's extremely rare. It's like old TV rip or something. But let's not be too much around the bush. Start right before the movie starts with a black screen and everything. I'll fill in more detail. The details once we'll reach into them. All right, 3, 2, 1, click.
At this point, so much, cartoons weren't really just for comedy or sake, but they were literally just for entertainment.
This was the first. I mean, Snow White and Seven Dwarfs and Pinocchio already shook the world of cinema with the quality that was put into it. But this was like a huge step. The problem was this was in the middle of World War II, and even if America has not entered yet the war, a lot of bad things have happened so that people were not incented to go to the cinema. The movie could not be exported up until decades later in some cases. As such, even if the movie grossed a shit ton of money, it wasn't as much as Disney wanted, because Disney wanted to serialize this. And it did, and due to these kind of minor setbacks, it couldn't. It kind of fragmented those ideas in a couple of later movies, like Make My Music, but the idea was still kept on hold up until Fantasia 2000, which we'll get eventually. But for now, let's focus on this. And another thing that strikes immediately is that the orchestra is viewed live action completely. You're seeing all the artists doing things, and there's a clever usage of lighting by having different colors depending on the instrument user.
A bit of trivia, actually. Originally, they were thinking of actually animating the movie live alongside the orchestra.
With rotoscopes, I think.
Yeah, I know. Way back in the
Well, rotoscope was a big thing. Fleischer was perfecting it. Disney was not a major user of it. There was some of it in some works, but Fleischer was the one who was using the most.
However,
Anyway,
they canceled
this
it
is
for some
our
reason.
narrator of the day. Let me check specifically who is. Deems Taylor. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's the important bit.
Mm-hmm.
The most abstract one.
Oh, okay. I'll mention something when this guy's done.
Yeah, the Toccata and Fugue of Johann Sebastian Bach.
Oh yeah, I forget that there was actually an audience here for this.
Well, this kind of makes sense. Keep in mind, this is the pure. Since it's a sort of a purest form of art, it's very subjective in a sense. What you see on the screen is what the Disney animators thought they were imagining on while listening to the music. A recurring theme for this movie and the sequel. The Philadelphia Orchestra. There you go, and Leopold.
Leopold.
Leopold!
Okay, for those who don't know, Leopold Stokowski's primary
He's a
thing as
legend.
as a conductor was that he conducted without a baton. He just used his hands.
Back in the day, conducting without a baton was practically unheard of.
And there you go.
I'm sure we'll never hear that tune ever again.
Yeah, it's
It's not
funny.
like it became iconic in popular culture or anything.
It's like it's mostly associated with establishing shots of haunted castles. I have no idea why.
Because it sounds intimidating. Anyway, okay, but actually, Teo, when it comes to when it comes to trying to restore the original cut of the movie, it's kind of more of a problematic situation, and not because of those reasons. It has to do with the fact that Dean Taylor, aka this guy that we just saw, turns out that voice that you just heard, that's not Dean Taylor's voice. That's actually Corey Burton dubbing over him. Why? Because Dean Taylor's audio portions apparently were lost or in a state of disrepair. Basically, the original audio for Dean Taylor's narration has been completely lost.
This is also why I think this is also why then they did different cuts with cutting completely away Dean Taylor. Basically, guys, the version of this movie that I grew up with when I was a kid. I watched this movie a fuck ton of time when I was a kid, by the way.
Same.
There was one that just panned over the orchestra, sometimes with vague imagery, and instead had background narration. Obviously, it was voice acted here in my country, so I never knew about Dean Taylor and everything. It's only pretty recently I discovered this.
So I wonder if Corey Burton's a really good sound-alike for the guy.
Basically, unless sometime somewhere someone found a long-lost negative that happens to be well-preserved, we're most likely never going to hear Dean Taylor's voice ever from this movie ever again.
So, question: did any of the older editions, that are still purchasable, like VHS? I know I did watch the VHS version, but I forget. Are there any, relatively speaking, recent versions that actually do have the original, or is since the VHS version?
No, I don't think so. Maybe, like I mentioned, maybe some old TV rip, which also includes the censored content, but I'm not sure.
It's because
a lot of time has passed.
From what I'm seeing here, Jova, they kind of never restored Dean Taylor's dialogue, because, again, all of the recuts just cut off his dialogue in general, so, yeah. So, when it came time for the 60th anniversary DVD release, that's when they figured they would go back to the original sources to see if they could restore everything. Unfortunately, by the time they did that, the audio was completely unusable, which is why they had to use Corey Burton to dub the whole thing, basically.
Well, props to Corey Burton and the people who managed to lip sync the voice. I mean, I wouldn't have been able to tell.
Also, again, the music aside, which is also great for this one, this is also a great way to introduce the kind of movie this is supposed to be, because that's like it has been said, it literally starts with the orchestra, the action of everyone, and it plays that particular piece, and then it blends into animation, repeating a bit of the musical pieces that have been, which is what the Toccata and Fugue is. I don't remember what the intention of Bach that was behind this particular piece when Bach composed it, but it certainly wasn't. It was music for its own sake. So it was done in the time where composers were kind of like rock stars. They were all over the rage. They were asked by nobility, like Chopin, Mozart, or Beethoven. So it makes sense for being just a piece for the sake of audio pleasure.
So, about their original plans, I forget, why did they end up canceling, actually animating this live?
Again, they thought the budget would have been too high to sustain. Even if this original movie sold a lot, especially for the time, they thought it wouldn't have been enough to keep the momentum going.
Oh, that's right. This was back in the day when Disney were...
For example, one of the pieces that was supposed to be included in this was the Clair de Lune of Claude Debussy. Instead, it was repurposed as the segment Blue Bayou in Make My Music, I think.
Oh, that's right. This is back when Disney didn't have as much money as they do now, and couldn't afford to do all those big projects.
This also the reason why the next couple of movies, Dumbo was still kinda on the track, but a lot of the next movies that Disney did for a while were more played for safe. Particularly, Saludos Amigos and the Three Caballeros were specifically propaganda movies due to the campaign that America was doing with South American states back in the day.
Now, of course, Dean Stiller's audio, that's completely understandable because it's lost the flow of time. There's just nothing that can be done about it. Sadly, film preservation back in the 40s wasn't a thing, so this is understandable. There are plenty of movies from before the 40s that have been lost completely.
And yet
this
somehow
is just something...
they find their way on YouTube eventually. Somehow.
Well, that's because sometimes some people will find like an old negative that might have been well preserved by some kind of collector or some person, or maybe they find a catacomb or something like that. The problem is that by this point, Jova, it's way too much wishful thinking to say that we'll ever find any more of those movies from the 20s that were lost. At this point, it's just even if we did find a negative, it would have to be in an unusable state, and that alone is a titanic wishful thinking. But anyway,
who knows? Maybe in the near future we'll find a way to restore even stuff that's supposedly been destroyed.
Another thing is, yes, like Tia was mentioning earlier, the Sunflower character that we're going to see later, yes, that Sunflower has an African-American stereotype from the era that this was produced, which was edited out awkwardly in the 1969 release, and they've been trying their best to re-edit the thing out in more smooth and better, less awkward ways. And this particular release, which was released in 2010, is the best one yet. It's people who are not familiar with the original Sunflower character, they most likely won't notice the edits because they're done very smoothly in this version. Obviously, this is film revisionism, and as far as we know, the Sunflower footage is not lost. So it's just a sad case of Disney not standing up for the fact that we should not... eliminating the Sunflower character from the Fantasia is basically trying to pretend that these prejudices never actually happened,
It's
which
like
is
Disney
dishonest.
You know, it's like how
It's the same problem that Song of the South had and why it has never been released on DVD.
You know what's funny? They try and pretend like Song of the South didn't happen, yet the ride Splash Mountain clearly still has that song. And what's even better...
Yeah, it does.
Oh, you want to know what's even better? The Disney Mania remix for Zippity Doo Dah mentions that the song comes from the movie Song of the South. Yeah,
By the way,
nice job there, Disney.
in case you don't know, this movie will scare the living shit out of you if you're a kid. Enjoy.
Oh yeah, let's see. We've got, well, yeah, actually, pretty much even this one can scare you.
One of the aspects of abstractism. Some of the image may appear imposing, frightening to you.
It wouldn't be an
Surprisingly enough, Jova, the thing that scared me the most in this movie when I was a kid was not this, nor was the final segment.
It's the dinosaur one,
weird.
Isn't it?
No, it's the volcano. Yes, but they're at the beginning with the volcanoes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
we'll get to that.
Leave it to good old Disney to have Nightmare film what's essentially supposed to be a fancy music video.
Well, what I can get from it is that since it's supposed to, portray music on a visual media, it's supposed to stimulate all kinds of emotions. That's also why there's kind of everything into this. There's also a surprising decent amount of comedy into this.
Yes,
people tend to
absolutely.
think that Disney movies were not heavy on comedy before the 90s.
Heck?
No, the traces are all there, honestly.
I mean,
Yeah, it says here too. I just checked. The original 1940 version of this movie was 2 hours and 5 minutes. This 2010 release, as you can see, is 2 hours and 4 minutes. Only 30 seconds of footage were cut,
right.
specifically the sunflower footage.
So you're not missing much if you know.
No.
So this is the most authentic release we have yet. Hopefully someday Disney will have the balls to release the sunflower footage. I'm guessing not. But
great introductory piece.
Hey, Deem with Corey's voice.
This next one is interesting.
Oh, hi, Tchaikovsky.
oh,
yeah.
goody, Tchaikovsky.
Yeah, Tchaikovsky did not. It's similar to Chopin in some of his composition. Tchaikovsky did not like the Nutcracker Suite and wanted to destroy it. I don't know how it survived that, but honestly, I think it was for the better. It's one of the occasions where the piece of art was worth to be saved.
Forget, why do you hate the Nutcracker Suite?
He just didn't thought it was on pair with his other compositions. It's the artist ego thing. Now, this one, I think, is tied to the second category. It has a sort of story, even though it's not well defined. Specifically, I think it's about basically the passing of seasons.
By the way, look forward to a live-action movie of this. Wow.
Yeah. At the time of this recording, we know there's a live-action movie based on this,
which
segment,
has Morgan
kinda?
Freeman as a narrator.
Sure. Well,
Right.
Well,
I guess
it's
you needed
Morgan
more
Freeman.
freckles.
I mean, sure, it's Morgan Freeman. A movie with him narrating, please sign me up.
So yeah, unlike the traditional ballet of the Nutcracker, which tells instead the story of the Nutcracker fighting the Rat King during a Christmas Eve and all that jazz, there have been a countless adaptation of that. This instead takes a very different approach. Another thing that Disney's animators will use regularly on these pieces.
All right. Censorship aside, I can at least assure that just like the other Diamond Edition Blu-ray releases, the restoration of the movie itself is pretty much perfect. The image is immaculate in its cleanliness and sharpness, allowing the viewer to see background textures and even the subtle shadows. Basically, you're seeing here everything that's on the original negative.
Basically, it's the best way the movie was as Disney intended.
In some ways, even better than the original because cleaned up visuals.
Yeah, cleaned up quality.
So
I should say, before we move on from that particular subject, I generally prefer disclaimers to be put at the beginning of re-releases instead of outright erasure.
Yeah. I mean,
just have Whoopi Goldberg.
Does no one any favors.
Like,
we
just
all know this happened.
Just do like what it's kind of like
it's like a Warner Brothers did. It's like, I mean, they even have Whoopi Goldberg also mentioned that they're not going to try and erase the history because, what they did.
And yet for some reason they went back on that word. But
history is there to learn from, So
basically basically Warner Brothers released the Tom and Jerry Platinum Collection, which was basically a volume of shorts, like completely uncut and uncensored, and with the usual that these things would be to pretend that these things never happened. But then when it came to the volume 2 that was supposed to be released, we even got to see a cover and everything. It got canceled because the racism in the shorts that were going to be included was so racist that Warner Brothers got cold feet, and yeah. You can probably guess what happened.
Anyway, in some kind of segment, other particular segments, this one is divided into micro segments, which were tied to the specific piece of the original composition.
Yeah,
In this case,
this looks very much like the mushrooms that we're going to see in the Alice in Wonderland movie in a few years after this.
This is the Chinese dancer.
The animated one. I mean,
we have a new animated one coming up.
No, the way Peter was mentioning.
Oh, you mean as in it's coming?
The one that came out after this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's the thing. Disney movies tend to not only Robin Hood or outright recycled animations, but otherwise a lot of Disney movies tended to have features that add callbacks to previous ones, like particular facial types and everything.
Yep.
Continue what you were saying, Joe. I think.
Yeah, it's weird that Warner Brothers did go back on that, though, because, they had even worse stuff, essentially in the Golden Collection 3 of Looney Tunes, so why would they chicken out on Tom and Jerry?
That's just a thing, Joe, but, new management. This is the same management that they took. This is the same management that thought it was a great idea to cancel Person of Interest, despite being both an audience and critics hit.
So, now we go on to more...
This is one of the more iconic musical segments of this, yeah.
It doesn't even make any sense when you get right down to it to do stuff like to this movie and others, because the only people nowadays who watch these Blu-ray and DVD releases are animation fans who are already way too old to be bothered by this. I mean,
I wouldn't say they're too old to be bothered by it, but...
Well, not just that, Pedro. It can be also said that they're showing these to their kids as well.
Well, either way, though, the problem is, it's Disney's obsession with trying to appear as squeaky clean as possible.
Yeah.
Although I think that's hurting them more than it is helping them.
Topical, but let's not get into that.
Keep in mind that, also the reminder, similar to, exactly like in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and Pinocchio, every frame that you're seeing, which is 24 per second, was completely animated. So if you're seeing all these multiple objects moving on screen and everything, it's all animated frame by frame. This was basically a nightmare to do.
Well, they had to do it several times before bigger animation tactics could be made.
This is also why part of things they wanted was ultimately cut, or reworking some other things.
Also, this is a 2-hour movie with all these frame-by-frame animations, and what a lot of people don't bring up, although it's probably obvious to most, think of the amount of frames they had to scrap during the making of this as well.
Even for minor mistakes, like a different outline or something.
No matter how professional of an animator you are going to make a mistake. So imagine how much they had to scrap in this.
It must have hurt. Oh, hi, Cleo.
Yeah.
That's the one advantage that computer animation does have. Not only is it more environmental friendly, it's also much easier to correct your mistakes.
This is why I think the best solution nowadays is computer hand-drawn animation. Essentially, you can do hand-drawn animation, but using a computer monitor.
Yeah.
Cuphead did both.
Yeah. Why more companies
Actually, no, Shiro. The animation in Cuphead is done exactly in the same style that this movie was. They went back and actually used the exact same techniques that were used back in the 40s.
I think
there is some computer animation within Cuphead.
Yeah.
Some.
Okay.
Very little, but some, yes, there is.
Ruined forever, not a true authentic.
Some backgrounds like Matchstick's Tower or the Genie the Great's Pyramid.
Very, very
Cuphead
little
is ruined
of it
forever.
Let me put it like this. Essentially, they hand-draw a lot of...
MHR, you lied to me.
Here's the way it goes. They hand drew most of it, but when it came to adapting some motions for how it would work in a video game, they had to do computer animation. Otherwise, we would have gotten something like Time and Eternity.
I don't know. They had the backing of Microsoft. Well, I mean,
No, Pedro. Money's got nothing to do with it. Essentially, though, the computer animation helped keep the hand-drawn animations low. Think about it like this. The
So
yeah,
almost
this
the
is weird.
almost the entirety of that game is
Okay,
hand-drawn.
and now
Exactly.
from all the fish's tail combined, the new one is born.
So there you go, guys. We just saw a fish orgy create a newborn.
I'm not sure. To
Hey,
be fair, this is, I think it's called the Arabian Dance, this particular mini segment. Basically, even if it tells a different kind of thing with an Nutcracker suit, the single titles of each mini piece are basically tied to how they actually play. Like, for example, the Arabian Dance is slower, more ambiental, aesthetic, and all that jazz. While the Chinese dance from before instead had a more similar style to what you'll think a dance with that title would be. Yes, Joa?
why, Miss Musical Fish, you're trying to seduce us.
Just ignore it. She's going to sleep anyway. Bye.
Gonna sleep with the fishes?
Pretty much. So, Jova, this is all quiet and dandy. The audience can be relaxed for a second, right?
Summertime!
Yeah, seriously.
Trey Pak, my favorite of Tchaikovsky's tunes.
The Russian dance, I think, which makes sense considering how this particular flower is animated.
In fact, there's actually a remix of this done by Donkey Kong of all things on the Bongo Beats game.
You know what's interesting? There's a section in Don Bluth's Troll in Central Park that's supposed to be an homage to this, and it's a complete insult.
Yeah,
Well,
it doesn't even use the actual Trey Pak.
No, I mean in terms of having the plant stance, like
I
Yeah,
know,
I
I know.
remember that. Jesus
Also,
Christ.
these are some of the cutest flowers you'll ever see.
Communism has never been so vibrant. And there you go.
But
Like, when I was a kid, I kinda not was disturbed, but I was a bit unsettled. I was thinking all the flyers died at the same time, or something like that.
nah, but
It's
still,
the way the shot was framed, obviously, and again, kids' imagination and stuff.
True.
And now we get to the other most famous mini piece of this.
Oh look, it's more Tinkerbell's Exhibitionist Sisters.
That's the thing. Pixies and fairies back then were imagined exactly this. The whole underpants thing was basically censors.
Yeah.
And there you go, with the awakening of, I guess, September in this case, the
Autumn?
the season passes from summer to autumn. There we go. Which also reminds me, another Don Bluth movie kind of tried to show the passage of the seasons Thumbelina.
Oh, goody,
was weird.
Thumbelina. We are going to
Fantasia.
Yes.
cover that movie.
Fantasia is most likely Don Bluth's
Main
favorite Disney
inspiration.
movie. Not because the original idea for Land Before Time was actually supposed to take that one section that we're going to see later and
Yeah.
basically make a whole movie like that. However, Spielberg and Lucas thought that would be a bit too.
Yeah, I've read the behind-the-scenes stuff. They wanted to make Sharptooth even scarier from what I've seen.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, trust me, Teo. It's very well known that the original cut that Don Bluth was planning on was much darker than what the movie originally was. Unfortunately, we're never going to see it because the footage has been
Sadly.
lost.
Wait. There was actually footage distributed of that?
If I recall, there were some, not sketches, but, you know...
It was never properly released to the public, Jova, and by this point, it's been eliminated.
I don't even know what company holds the rights to the franchise. I mean,
Universal.
considering, yeah, we're making such a shit ton of sequels anyway, so yeah. Comcast, of course. There you go. So yeah, overall, this is not exactly one of my favorite segments of this. My definitely least favorite one is later on. But I think it's still okay to me. Like, it's one that takes its time, and I think it's more enjoyable as an adult than as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's worth mentioning is that this movie was clearly a pioneer in terms of the art of the music video.
Yeah. Keep in mind also, this was around the time basically where people stopped going also to concert, also because of the war in general. But after World War II, basically concerts started diminishing, and with the rise of the pop culture of the music, the classic music started to fade away. So this was kind of like the last big hooray of its kind, sadly. And there you go. Well, now it's winter. Okay, and now the move for basically its final 2 minutes of the segment. The segment will decide to go apeshit with the music.
Yeah. This
Which is
this was one of the segments I remembered the most.
Yeah,
from
I
this
can
bit.
imagine. And for some reason, this was included in the world that they chose for Kingdom Hearts 3D.
Uh-huh.
Sora traversed the forest, while I think also Riku the same, yeah.
Should be as no shock. Fantasia was a world with a music gimmick executed a lot better than Little Mermaid in Kingdom Hearts 2.
Well, it's Fantasia. Obviously, they would want to get that one right.
That's how I really wanna. By the time we're recording, Kingdom Hearts 3 is still to come out, so I'm really hoping some last news about another. Oh, and now we're getting probably the most iconic. Yep.
Yep, it's based off of a book. Or something? A play?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Fun fact, before this particular segment was ultimated, Disney considered either Donald or one of the Seven Dwarfs to star into this.
Because at the time, Snow White was kind of their mascot.
And not only that, Mickey was having a troubled phase at this point. These people were thinking that Donald, since he was rising up at this time, Donald would have done the same thing that Mickey did to Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, basically becoming the new mascot and Mickey getting the shaft. But this was basically the new breakout thing for Mickey that launched him in popularity.
To the point where some people think he's actually the hero of this movie. And before you
there you go.
ask...
This was also the introduction of the Sorceress character. Up until, I think, the 70s, he had no name. But then they decided to give one, well, being a bit... having a bit of creativity, they called him Yan Sid, which is obviously Disney spelled backwards. He also had a voice in the 70s because it was part of like a parade or something, but it wasn't until the Kingdom Hearts games that he established with a new voice actor, Corey Burton.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of Oswald, don't worry, folks, he's technically actually brought back via the Mickey
Thanks to Warren
days.
Spector. Yeah, if there's one positive thing that the Epic Mickey games managed to do is to have Disney getting back the rights to Oswald.
And now we may have an Oswald
unfortunately,
spin-off plan.
That's the thing, Joe. Aside from the Epic Mickey games, have they used Oswald in some fashion?
Yeah, he's guest starred in some of the Mickey Mouse shorts, and apparently he may or may not have a spin-off plan.
That's good to know, at least.
I mean, heck, the free
Caballeros.
Yeah. There's actually a show of that, and apparently Daisy's nieces have shown up in that, so it seems like they're bringing back characters old and new.
So
now,
yeah, Mickey's...
why they haven't brought that show over to America despite it being voiced in English yet is beyond me.
Disney had practically zero marketing, it just popped up.
Well, that's the thing. It's not even available in America. It's available in other places. I mean,
So,
I get it
yeah,
showing up in Latin America,
much-
but even in Europe, I think.
Much like in the original story of at least back in then, Mickey just here is the apprentice of Yancy. Then, since Yancy has gone to sleep for a bit and just left his wizard hat, Mickey thinks that's a good. It's the only thing he needs as a catalyst to do some magics, and decides to experiment on a broom with some seizure. Ow. Also, just pointing out, like, the irony in all of this is that Mickey is doing all of this just to not do his work of... which is, by the way, this work is kind of stupid, just putting water from one well to the other. I don't understand the logistic of this, but whatever.
Well, it's good old Yensid, Tio. When does the guy ever make sense?
I guess it's a Karate Kid kind of like approach. You know, pass the wax, remove the wax thing.
Wax on, wax off.
Yeah. And so basically, Mickey is doing all of this just to, work less. But honestly, considering the effort that he's doing, he would probably, do less fatigue just by doing his fucking
he's
job.
He's still doing some of the work as he's going along. Look at him. But
I know, right?
You could just do this yourself.
I guess he's having fun or something.
He looks like he's having fun.
You know, the funny thing is, like, well, there's actually a ride at Disney World now called Mickey's PhilharMagic, where basically Mickey is kind of now an experienced sorcerer himself, so of course he conducts a mystical orchestra. So, Donald then has the smart idea to mess with his hat, and then that takes you on an insane ride, and then Mickey kind of ends up having to solve everything, sort of how, well, let's just see how things go in this wood.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, the apple
You're
don't
still
fall
there,
too far
Pedro?
from the tree.
Yeah, I'm here. Why?
Oh, sorry, I thought you were out. Sometimes
And this is why you never fall asleep during work, kids.
Coffee is your best friend, mate.
Yeah.
So of course, Mickey has to go super drunk with his power.
Or is this just a dream?
Well, yeah, that's the thing. It's literally the power going through his head.
Yep.
It's kind of a shame that I missed any re-releases of these in the theaters. If I actually make another one, I should probably get to see it.
Give it some time. Disney like to, well, maybe not always, but when it comes to their big
40s
heavy
right
hitters,
now is almost the 80th anniversary, so maybe something, who knows.
when it comes to their heavy hitters, you can definitely expect it to be in theaters for a slight time.
Yeah. I mean, it works spectacularly for 2001: Space Odyssey, so I can't even fathom to imagine what this kind of music and concept-based animation can be on the big screen.
And who knows, maybe they'll even re-release it in 3D like they did with The Lion King.
I don't really mind the 3D, it's something I can live without. But yeah, thanks Mickey, you done goofed and you basically flooded the entire apartment. That's also another cool thing. We never know exactly where we are, if it's a castle, a simple lair or something. Yeah, but the way it's structured is simple enough that you don't really care.
So apparently the broom has been doing such a good job that it's now flooded the place.
This is how you fuck up with command prompt, people. That's how you need it not to loop things up.
Hey, did Mickey not look up how to fix this?
And now, time for a Mortal Kombat fatality. Keep in mind, in the original storyboard, it was supposed more to be more direct and graphic. Finish him!
Yep.
Yeah,
There you go.
obviously this is before he had a Keyblade to master over, so he had to use what was there.
Unfortunately, for some reason, the broom works with, I guess, a worm kind of logic, in a sense that if you break it, it just
Well,
multiplies.
Hydra logic.
Yeah.
Good luck with that, Mickey.
Violence does not solve your problems. I guess that's a great moral that we learned today.
Don't open it.
How big was the room even anyway?
I wonder.
How many pieces did Mickey murder that thing into?
Well,
That's
he
what
was
rage
very
does to
thorough
you.
about it.
Trampled to death by brooms. That's
Very
an interesting way to go.
humiliating. Yeah, it's a bit too late for that.
Eventually, it'll get so much that it'll go out the window by itself.
Oh yeah, they're still
Also-
following his example.
Yeah, no.
Oh,
Wait, what?
Oh, okay.
By the way, considering this is also canon, kind of like in Kingdom Hearts in a sense, but this was what happened during Mickey's training, I really would be interested to know what their logistical is, especially considering Mickey is much more serious in the Kingdom Hearts game, even in Birth by Sleep, where it's at its most naive.
I guess it's to semblance this was
I
really
remember
back in
too.
his younger years.
Well, remember, Teo, in his Kingdom Hearts characterization, he's the king of Disney.
The
So
future
obviously,
ruler, yeah.
so obviously, he has much more responsibilities.
So somehow Mickey goes from being the steamboat hand to being the king. I'm still
Sure,
waiting
why
to see
not?
how they connect the dots
Pete,
on that.
Drova, Pete goes like from being a steamboat captain to being a fake superhero. But yeah, finally you see this notice some of the commotion, says like, fuck this. Literally.
Well, Moses, you need your staff there.
This is why you don't allow pay-to-win players on a free server.
Yeah.
You just ruin everything. Yeah. This is gonna be hard to explain. This is also another great moment because the characters actually don't speak with each other, but the stairs are all what you need to convey what they actually want to go for.
You done goofed, Mickey.
Yeah.
big time.
Go back to work, dipshit. Wait for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there you go, that's Walt Disney himself playing as Mickey.
Yep. Fortunately, his audio did survive.
Yep.
It would be a cold day in Hades before
I
they
mean,
let
it's a
that
bit
go.
of an ego stroke in this one, the fact that he congratulates with Stokowski himself, but I don't know, it's charming enough. Oh, and now, this interesting moment. Hold on. Apparently this was not improvised or anything. This actually happened, and we just decided to just let it in the movie because it was too much fun.
And yeah, I think they probably wanted to do this all in one take too.
Yeah, and now on to my favorite segment, the Rite of Spring of Igor Stravinsky. Now, here's the particular thing. Igor Stravinsky was still alive when this piece was was chosen by Disney and put into the movie. Stravinsky died in the 70s, I think. Stravinsky was very on board with the idea, even with what Disney decided to do with it. However, circumstances made that Disney change the ending, or maybe more like omitted part of it without telling Stravinsky. As such, Stravinsky wanted to actually sue the Disney company because of this. Ultimately, he didn't do it, but he basically gave up on the whole animation thing and basically retired himself, which is kind of a shame.
So yeah, when you think about it, this was Disney doing with musical tunes what they would later try to do with fairy tales.
Yeah. This also is a very important segment because even for today's standards, it's outdated as fuck. It's basically a kind of like a time capsule to watch this. However, it was very important because it was a bold statement. This, like it's been just said, instead of being a traditional series of primitive ballet that the original composition was for, Disney decided to tell the origin of the world as science theorized it was back in the day in the 40s. A couple of things have changed, but the basic gist of it is the same. This was very progressive because at the time creationism was still very rampant in schools and among studies. So this was basically Disney issuing a statement in the world of art for the entire world, for the common people who were going to see the movie anyway. People tend to think that media nowadays tends to be too involved with politics and everything, but I can assure you that just back in the day it was kind of the same. Hollywood has kind of always tried to be knee deep in the world's problems.
Well, yeah, I mean, just recently Disney's still doing it with Zootopia. So.
Yeah. This also is the longest of the pieces. I think it clocks in 20 minutes in total. So sit tight, people.
Good old music tune where you have to play for long. Trust me, it's not as easy as they make it look or sound to play for that long. Especially
in the beginning, of course, in the beginning, there was nothing. People theorize, the most common theory of everyone is obviously the Big Bang, as in a mass of matter eventually exploded and continuously expanded, it's still doing to this day, and eventually formed the celestial corpse, the galaxies, asteroids, all that jazz. And the final story here takes place in one of the appendages of the Milky Way, a spiral-like galaxy. This segment always fascinated me as a kid because it made me ask so many questions. Keep in mind, ever since I was a kid, I was kind of an asshole who were asking questions about everything. But this one was kind of the thing that put me on basically learning a lot of science and stuff, even if it was most simple things because it needed to be for a kid.
And if you see there, that is what will eventually become the Infinity Stone of Mine. So yeah, imagine, Tio, they're trying to merge the Marvel canon into the Disney canon.
If they do it creatively enough, sure. This is a nebula. This is eventually what stars become. That's the thing, especially back. It's still going on in this day through space, but especially back in the day, elements and matter were in a very boiling, chaotic, primitive state, colliding, fusing without basically a logic, the true form of chaos, basically. So planet Earth, at least from as far as we know it, only planet Earth, is the only place in the universe up until now that we know has the most stability onto it. Everything else is a bit of a mishmash. But that's how basically the natural order of things for the universe are. And in this case, we're focusing on this tiny planet with its moon, basically floating in space in its period revolution. This is supposedly some billion years ago, basically, because we're going through the very origins of the universe and everything. In this case, but just like every other planet, the Earth was formed when a bunch of matter, mostly asteroids and everything, collide together thanks to the force of gravity and formed this gigantic ball. As a result of that, though, there was a lot of instability onto it. While elements were still present, they were in a very different state from now, obviously. The atmosphere, for example, was similar to the one of right now Venus, with deadly gas.
Well, deadly to us, anyway.
Well, obviously, general. And also the surface was constantly changing. Until basically around this time, it was just a gigantic rock. Therefore, any kind of movement made sure that volcanoes formed everywhere, and the eruption constantly changed the landscapes. It was truly like a hellish vision. This, like I mentioned, this is the segment that scared me the most as a kid because of the sudden kind of music. Keep in mind, I'm a person that's very susceptible to jump scares, not necessarily through visuals, but through audio. It's the fucking audio that kills me all the time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Music cues.
Yeah.
Let's just say, folks, you're in for the traditional Disney acid sequence, the kind that will either have you wondering what the heck you just saw, or have you cuddling in bed with nightmares.
Yeah.
Mm.
As is typical of a volcano, it starts out slowly, but then bubbles up higher, hotter.
Again, the bubbles are because of the gases. That's what happened during eruption. Pressure, all the jazz gas, and the liquid molten materials gets released up in the air. It's a process that's still going on in this day, obviously, on a much slower kind of occasion. But yeah, maybe not like this, though. This is more like, ironic, 5 years before the atomic bomb, a very similar effect.
Yep.
By the way, that smoke is actually a live-action shot of the smoke. That's a nice touch.
Hmm.
Now our attention shifts onto this particular volcano. I don't know exactly why they this one in particular, but sure, why not? This one is similar to the ones in a way. If you live there, it works exactly. Instead of being more violent, it's quieter in that case. Lava flows without too much smoke release or ash flowing everywhere, and instead it's just a single slow current that trumps over everything that it touches until it reaches the ocean. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Disney animators based this went on a Y to actually see what it was like there. It's also a bit of a shame that this segment was, since it was my favorite, this segment was the one that I wanted the most in the Fantasia world in Kingdom Hearts 3D, and instead it wasn't there.
I guess you'd have to wonder, though, what would they really do with that world? Because
but first of all, surfing on lava, that's cool as fuck.
True.
Yes, it is.
Second, we could have used the dinosaur segment later on, honestly.
True. I mean, I guess...
Also, this is... Oh, yeah, let me tell for a second. This is a bit of anachronism jump on, because water was not present around this time. It just came in thanks to some asteroid bombardment. But again, it's a dated scientific showcase. Go on, Jova.
You know what I was also surprised is that they didn't include Yen Sid in any form, for this world. And they could have done like what they did for, the Three Musketeers in Birth by Sleep, like have it be a different...
Actually, the Three Musketeers was in 3D.
Well, yes. What I mean is like, in Three Musketeers, wasn't it like a different dimension or alternate timeline?
I think so. I never bothered to check. Pedro, do you know anything more? Just don't go research. Don't worry. It's just a case.
I don't remember. I don't think it was.
Really?
Even in case, it was just part of the King's Past, I think. Just in case.
I could have sworn it was an alternate timeline.
Also, Jova, you can see. I honestly think at some point it was considered this segment to be in 3D, because if you remember, you get the sequence where the T-Rex is chased. The T-Rex Dream Eater is chasing the carriage in the Musketeers world. I think it was an enemy that was repurposed for that segment. Kingdom Hearts has a tendency of doing that.
Possibly.
So now that I guess the water was enraged by all that lava, and a part of the world has been submerged, eventually, thanks to, according to science, some electricity ignition and some help, I guess, from asteroids that impacted the Earth, life originated. Now, it was obviously really simple back in the day. Monocellular organism with just working with just a single cell, roamed around and basically ate and reproduced all day. It wasn't that much of a fun. If you played the video game Spore, you know exactly what this is like.
Hey, honey, you're a single cell molecule and I'm a single cell molecule.
There
Let's
you go.
multiply.
Math is a thing.
Indeed.
And there you go. Just by the mere spreading. Oh yeah, we get this weird transition shot with smoke. I guess
Disney
it's
really
so
seems to like to have their evilly animated smoke.
Yeah. And eventually life evolves. It's not maybe super complex at the moment, but it's making progress. And it takes its time. I mean, again, a lot of people need to remember also that mankind appearing on Earth is basically at the moment is at the very last kind of beats of Earth's clock. We're basically the last members to arrive at the party at the moment.
Yep.
It took billions and billions of years to arrive to this point. This is why also it remains one of the greatest mysteries, quote unquote, of Earth. And there you go. Eventually it forms into fishes, which gradually also evolves into different types, shapes, color, and they also adapt to survive. The laws of Darwinism means that the strongest, and in case sometimes the smartest, also survives.
But Theo, everybody knows the Mueller experiment is bullshit.
Totally. And eventually, at some point, some fish dared to actually peek out of the water. What happened after a lot of time were instead the dinosaurs. Now, when I was a kid, I knew exactly every name of the species of these dinosaurs because I was really into dinosaurs in general. Nowadays, I tend to struggle a bit more because they kind of flew a bit on my radar. But still, I really, really love this segment in general for how creative it was with the portrayal of different dinosaurs.
Ah, yeah.
Also, fun fact, I will mention this also later for a thing that happens, but I watched this movie right after. Well, not immediately right after, but before this, I did watch Land Before Time. So I was already used to dinosaurs, but even if it's obviously Don Bluth and such as a lot of dark themes, Land Before Time still has a positive ending and everything. The way nature goes here, it's probably not the same.
Yeah, these dinosaurs for one are not as easy on the eyes. Oh, that reminds me. In terms of the ending that got changed to this, would you say it's an improvement or a downgrade?
I honestly don't know. I think they could have, considering they were already balls deep into this with the message of the scientific creation of the universe and everything, they could have gone the extra mile over it. But I don't think there would have been too much harm. I'm guessing, considering the budget time and everything, Disney may have too much fear. By the way, Jurassic World kind of homaged this.
Yep.
One of the few things I actually liked about that movie.
One of the laws of the jungle.
Aside from Jurassic Park, the only dinosaur movie I grew up with was a very, very boring movie.
Wow.
I also get this. There was an Hanna-Barbera cartoon I watched as a kid, which was very obscure. Dink the Dinosaur.
I don't know who made it, but it was that terrible CGI dinosaur movie.
The Disney one.
It was just called Dinosaur, I think.
Yeah,
was
Disney.
That was so bad.
Well, I don't think it
I
was
like that movie.
bad.
The problem is that the story was a bit too generic.
True. I kinda was rolling my eyes at some of the cliches they were going for. I appreciate also the things that we did. For example, the actual real backgrounds over the CGI that was impressed over it.
I guess for me, the story being generic didn't hurt as much because, well, I mean, I hadn't really seen as many other movies, so I guess it didn't really hurt for me. I mean, it seemed like a story
It just didn't
that
do anything that really excited me in any way.
Oh, sure, I can get that, but I wouldn't call it awful. I mean, if anything, I would.
I should probably need to rewatch it again one of these days just to see
Same.
if my opinion has changed on it.
Me too.
So yeah,
of course we have the Apatosaurus is here.
Also, you've seen the Archaeopteryx, one of the first dinosaurs discovered with feathers. Nowadays, I think the opinions is a bit still conflicted because people, don't know still if dinosaurs actually all of them had feathers or not. It's a huge debate that's still going on to this day.
Hell, the T-Rex of all things may have had feathers.
I honestly don't think it's big of a deal, whatever case or not. But obviously, when we'll get a definitive answer, it will be for the better.
I mean, it's not
regardless
like we
of
have
the
any dinosaurs alive to complain that we're misrepresenting their species now, do we?
I think the only people who would really care about that little detail are enthusiasts and artists, really.
Yeah.
Yes, like the same artist who did that little thing with Jurassic Park 3, but I digress.
Well, for example, Double Helix actually went on its way to make a feathered alternate skin for Riptor for the new Killer Instinct. That was nice.
Yeah. I guess, to be fair, with Jurassic Park 3, it was during that time when they were debating maybe the Spinosaurus did walk on hind legs like a T-Rex. Of course, that later got proven wrong, but I'll admit, them sticking to their guns on that, at the very least, was an interesting thing, and hey, it was easily excused by the fact that Jurassic Park doesn't always get the genetics right of the dinos.
Oh, that's cruel. Come on, man.
This is the best Land Before Time sequel I've ever seen.
Don't you
About
mean prequel?
that.
Survival.
I think you mean prequel, Pedro.
Don't tell me we're doing those next because there's so many sequels. But
Well, remember, Teo, when the first Jurassic World came out, Universal released a new sequel to The Land Before Time. Maybe there's a new one coming to Time with Fallen Kingdom.
And there you go, the T-Rex. In all of its
The
frightening
star of
glory.
any dinosaur movie.
Yeah, he's the one whose name you always remember. Although this T-Rex is fashioned a bit differently from most T-Rexes.
I mean, the only thing I noticed is maybe a bit wrong is that the arms, even if they're tiny, they're a bit too long, but everything seems to be checking everything else.
He's got also furry fingers, which is more like an Allosaurus.
Oh, that's right. Fortunately, yeah, praise like the Stegosaurus were too heavy to outrun a T-Rex, so they needed to develop something else to actually have a chance against it.
Believe it or not, the T-Rex is also considered a villain of this movie. I know.
Even though it technically is, and yes, it's a predator and there's a vicious kind of like attitude when it comes to hunting, but at the end of the day, it's nature doing its course. It's not moved by malicious spirit or anything. It's literally the nature of
T-Rexes don't even possess the brain capacity to actually think in those terms anyway.
Well,
yeah, those are the Velociraptors, actually. Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe T-Rexes did. I mean, later science has shown that...
That's the thing, Jova. T-Rexes were a subject of a lot of things that people did not know what was going on. Like,
even if they did, it's very clearly a one-track mind for...
Yeah, a lot of people thought at some point that T-Rexes were like sarcophagus, like vultures or something.
Oh,
it was a phase that I never liked because I... Oh, by the way, the T-Rex is eating the Stegosaur alive before he actually dies.
Yeah.
Charming. And there you go. Just like nature plays its course, to the victim go the spoils, and everyone else just fucks off.
Yep. Oh yeah, there was also a phase when people thought the T-Rex was more of a scavenger and wasn't actually that big.
Yeah, that's what I mentioned. Instead of a proper predator.
So again, during the same phase that Jurassic Park 3.
What's the most dated part of all this? The extinction of a dinosaur. Now, this back in the day, people thought that due to earthquakes and everything, basically droughts came rampant, and basically food became non-existent for herbivores, and as such, then carnivores perished along the way. Obviously, this proved to be wrong in the long run because mammals needed to survive in order for the evolution to continue. And then also fishes as well. But then the most recent theory, I think it's still the asteroid one, right, Jova?
Asteroid or Ice Age?
Yeah. The idea is that at some point an asteroid, a very big asteroid, landed on what today is the Gulf of Mexico and created basically like the equivalent of a shitload of nuclear bombs. And those who were not killed by the explosion were subjected to an entire ice age, and since the dinosaurs are cold-blooded, I think they're still considered cold-blooded. They couldn't survive the lower temperature. It's the same problems that they present in some of the Godzilla movies. The fact that such a gigantic creature needed a particular complex system to survive, and the conditions they were putting into this now were too much of a strain to them. But that's not all that happened, at least for the context of this movie, obviously. Some dinosaurs actually had the misfortune of dying because they fell into tar pits, basically. Ironically, fossilizing themselves for thousands and millions of years.
And in other cases, making them easy pickings for predators stupid enough to come around the tar.
Yeah.
Or just get what was hanging out.
Yeah.
Huh, so in some ways the predators actually did the
And there you go.
vegetarians.
Even the T-Rex, as mighty as he had been, eventually has to succumb to the fate of everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically the ultimate imagery of the story that he wants to narrate. Like I said, I watched Land Before Time before this, so I thought, oh, that's okay. We're just gonna find the Great Valley, right? About that.
Well, they found the Great Valley in the sky.
Ugh.
Well, that's a way to put it.
Oh, but don't
Even
worry, the nightmare
the next
fuel
one
is
will
not
movie.
over.
Even dinosaurs go to heaven.
Oh god.
That's a goofy smile. Brr.
Shame it's kind of dead, but
Yeah.
there we go.
So our last segment takes place during the course of an eclipse. So for some reason, I guess symbolism or anything for
There's just a lot of red.
Yeah.
Wonderful color, but quite foreboding.
Like Legolas said, it means some blood is being spilled for some reason. Yeah, and according to the science back then, this supposedly is what formed the continents, a gigantic series of, earthquakes and everything. Yes, that's kind of ultimately what happened, but it occurred in a much longer time span. Mountains did not just pop up like fungi.
We haven't got time to explain this process, though.
Just pretend it's super sped up.
Yes.
And also, sadly, they reused some of the animations from earlier for this. This clearly was, again, the longest. Being the longest of the segment, it meant also they was putting the animators to a strain.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand
Not to
if
mention
they
the rest
chose
of this
to.
process, really.
Yeah. So I understand if they chose to recycle a lot of animation for this final bit.
Also, friendly reminder, they had to time this animation right with the orchestra that was playing.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
That
Also,
must have been
quick.
fun.
Oh, sorry, Jova.
Go ahead.
Go on.
Oh, no, just a quick addendum to my previous comment about Cuphead. The only thing that was CGI was the coloration, for the most part. Well,
it
the
was
computer
digital.
generated. Yeah, just to enhance the appearance and, keep the movements as fresh as they wanted them to look.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the entire thing is entirely hand-drawn.
Now,
much, yeah.
here's
They just
the
zhuzhed
thing.
it up with the computer, really.
Now that the segment ends like this, with this foreboding shot of the eclipse being completed and the Earth eventually fading onto it. The original plan was to showcase some cavemen actually on a camp near discovering basically fire, basically meaning that the age of man was beginning. This is what Disney was considering was too much and ultimately cut it. It was supposed to be like a 10-30 seconds shot. So we'll never know how it would look like, but it was enough for Stravinsky to kind of be pissed off. A shame, but I guess this segment just works fine for its time. So since it was a bit heavy, all of this death, life cycle, nature thing, let's take a small briefer. Thanks.
Yeah, there you go. This is probably one of those particular bits of narration that were cut in a lot of cuts because, well, in home releases obviously don't need this.
Yeah.
But for the sake of authenticity, they decided to keep this in the 2010 Blu-ray. for the sake of being as authentic as possible.
I honestly think it's fine. It showcases
Oh, yeah.
again more of authenticity, and it gives some more credit to the Philadelphia Orchestra, which again did such a fantastic job for this entire movie.
Well, have fun when we handle the uncut version of Bedknobs and Broomsticks, then.
Again, Joe, I honestly don't think. I know that it goes on; those segments go on and on a bit too much, but I honestly endure them enough.
I'm okay with them too. In fact, that's the version I've kind of been raised on since when we got a VHS. It happened to be that uncut version. I mean, I think they're going a bit long too, but I'm fine with them. Oh, guess that was the end of the film.
Totally.
My guess is this is what showed up on the screen during the intermission.
Yeah.
Probably.
Back then, intermissions were not actually. I think also this kind of pioneered the intermission between.
Of course,
movies.
for this version, we're gonna skip that 15-minute intermission and get
Obviously.
back to the show.
But again, now that since again we have had to handle so many important themes in the last segment, it was again a bit too much. Now we're gonna get to see, if I recall it now, a bit of the orchestra. There's the orchestra just goofing around a bit, testing their instruments.
By the way, who else remembers the times when movie theaters used to have intermissions?
I actually do.
My country still has them, actually.
Really? In my
They're not as
cases,
common as they used to be, but very choppy, obviously. They literally cut in the middle of a scene or anything. But they're still there. Remember, Jova, they kind of need to sell those popcorns with the guy entering the room.
So in terms of intermission, I'm assuming that they save it only for like the really long movies, or do they actually do it for like almost any movie?
That's the thing, Jova. Most of the movies nowadays are at least 2 hours, so yeah.
Yeah, but even still, I mean, I'd hope they find a good place to. Did they do it for Infinity War?
Yeah, we did it. From the movies I've seen, I honestly think they're not too intrusive. They're not right in the middle of a scene. Oh, I guess it's some jazz, Jova?
Nah. Sort of.
No. We're more country, I guess.
Oh, no. I mean, jazz can use a violin in here.
You're the expert. You know better than me.
It's definitely an upbeat, peppy tune.
I honestly think it's a nice touch, this particular bit. Again, it fleshes out the orchestra and it lights up the mood.
Yeah, you kind of need to lighten up the mood after that last bit.
And also, again, it's the guy was like, "Stop it."
We need to do this. Come on.
Oh, but apparently he's impressed. Yeah. Now it's time for some sort of special guest, I guess.
Chernobog?
No, Joe. I remember he's afraid of the dark for some reason.
We need a new House of Mouse.
Okay.
The
Hello.
soundtrack. I think they actually made him more of a character in the sequel.
No.
Ah.
No, I can tell you that there's no such thing as this in Fantasia 2000. So, again, this is kind of a little demonstration of how the thought process of making this movie worked. The animation literally complementing the music of what's going on. Now, the real question will be, should have this be at the beginning? I don't think so. Like, I honestly think it's fine as it's placed here.
Me too.
Considering it's just, it's coming just after an intermission, then yeah, sure.
Higher! Come on. Oh. I think keep in mind that the Peter and the Wolf Disney version was supposed to be not in this movie, but in the eventual sequel that was never made back in the day. And I think they kind of wanted to do something similar to this, into that, since it's heavy reliant on leitmotif and specific instruments. Lower. Jesus. Oh goody, we're going Keichukabe on this.
What if you could see noise?
The triangle is important here.
Yeah, I was actually just about to say not do the triangle.
And now on to one of the most famous at the time, the sixth official symphony of Beethoven, the Pastoral. Yeah, Beethoven wanted to use that to describe the countryside, but when you come down to it, when you think of it like that, it's kind of boring if you think that way. So instead, Disney decided to spice things up a bit. Yeah. So basically, 57 years before Hercules, this was Disney trying to do mythology.
And you may think that they may have used some of the same animation for Hercules, because...
Even if not reused, basically homage. Hercules is full of homages to, obviously, to this segment. Like I think I mentioned a couple of it in the commentary. That's Dionysus. That Bacchus is the Roman name, unfortunately. Yeah, another thing it's deserved to mention. Romans, when they outright stole the Greek pantheon while conquering Greece, they basically renamed all of them. It's basically they did the Sonic OC character. They took the character and just say, "Oh no, it's the same character but just with a different name."
Essentially, a lot of the original, I think the original names were the ones named after planets.
Yeah, Zeus became Jupiter. Athena became. No, I think it stays the same. For example, Dionysus became Bacchus. Hades became Pluto, and stuff like that. There you go. We start with one of the most
This is
traditional.
also one I remember the most.
I wonder why, Shiroi. Again, the way the Greeks conceived mythology was obviously a more down to earth kind of like idea and mysticism to it. But obviously, Disney basically made a bit more cotton candy of it for the purpose of these segments. Don't worry, but later in the end, it becomes a bit darker, similar to what it was originally. But for the most part, it's more neutered for the purpose of fitting also with the music.
And of course, as true to most fiction, all the animals are acting like dogs.
Also, can I just point out one thing, and the most obvious thing, the fact that the father Pegasus is scary as fuck. In contrast to everything else, he has black with glowing red eyes. Like at least the child, like we see here, has normal eyes and everything, so as the cutesy appears. But the father, Jesus Christ. Bummer.
See, in any other work of fiction, the father would be evil. Based on appearance alone.
Oh. This also was the other major segment that was also featured in Kingdom Hearts 3D, which kind of makes sense. It had open areas and everything, and a Dream Eater's base, though, unicorns and everything, which I think it makes sense considering what was going on back there. It fit also the dream-like appearance. Again, it's a shame that 3D was confined basically on the 3DS, which meant the worlds needed to be smaller and with less things to do. Especially because it was Nomura's intention to have a Fantasia movie ever since the first Kingdom Hearts. In fact, the World of Darkness at the end of the first Kingdom Hearts was supposed to be a Fantasia movie. And so the last thing that remains, obviously, the Chernobog boss fight. But originally it was supposed to be a Fantasia-like movie where Sora and Dawn and Goofy will go through each of the sequence of being basically these trippy imaginary things that were going on around the time, concluding obviously with the fight with the devil and everything.
I still have yet to play that.
But that didn't came to fruition because we kind of needed to conclude the story arc with the Ansem and everything. So there you go. He did manage to get some of it, like I said, in 3D. But I'm really thinking that he probably wants to do that again. If not in Kingdom Hearts 3, in another future title. And there you go. This concludes the first mini segment of this, which transitions into this flower petal going around through the river. There you go. If the first mini segment was about more cutesy things with the unicorns, the Pegasi, and everything, this instead is, well, for the lack of a better term, a love story. It tells the story of the centaurs and the centaurette basically each finding their own partner, basically, because I guess it's the love season or something. Yeah, this is the only weird thing because Disney decided to use these mini angels of his, which were instead more tied to the Christian imagery with the painting. But I guess it was for the sake of not alienating completely the audience to it and have something familiar, we were familiar with when it comes to art and everything. I mean, there was technically one of the minor demigods, Heros, which basically became Cupid with the Roman names, which had the similar appearance, which is also tied to an old anime that I used to watch as a kid, but I know that it has not been localized in English. I don't know if it was if it arrived in the UK ever, but I don't think so. Basically, it's called Pollon. It had, I don't know which company made it. It was back in the 70s or 80s, I think. It was basically telling this story about the daughter of the god Apollo having to become a proper goddess of herself, basically making good deeds around the Greeks. And one of the things that happened was that she was accompanied by Eros, and very progressively for the time, Eros was all the time was completely butt naked, complete with kid penis going around.
Well, there's some very interesting fashion choices they got going on here.
Who are
With
you
the
to
headpieces
judge?
specifically.
Who are you to judge? As long as it works.
I mean, it seemed to work.
Yeah, those flowers might fall. You might want to.
Well, maybe that's the idea, I guess. Yeah, sure, go ahead. Next time on The Bachelor.
I was gonna say they kind of work like peacocks.
Yep. So there you go. Everything seems to be hunky-dory because everyone seems to have found a partner, right? You know, the love she loves me not game is not to be done after, you have a couple.
This is not an anime.
Nope. It's funny
Maybe.
because for Fantasia 2000, in one of the late segments, actually had some kind of anime influence to it, as noted. But oops, someone apparently hasn't found a partner yet. Hmm. You know, dude, you're not gonna solve your situation just by moping around like that. This is like the primitive equivalent of the friend zone.
There's always one at the party.
Yeah. And wow, what a coincidence! Another person who hasn't found a partner. Let's force romance between these two. Why not?
Let's ship them.
Yeah, it's literally what happens. These fucking mini angels are shippers.
They're also terrible third wheelers.
Yes.
Oh,
Now on to the other half. There we go. Totally a coincidence we found each other here, we swear.
I was just passing through.
Don't you see? This is what matters at the end. All's well that ends well. Again, it's a dated segment, but again, it's a thing that was at the for the time. No picking.
Away you. Shoot.
And there you go. The butt becomes a heart. That's a nice touch. But who cares about that Roman shit? Let's be drunk as shit instead.
So it is a party.
Yep. Basically, Dionysus, aka Bacchus, was the god of festivities of all kind, particularly wine. Basically, under his name, all sorts of parties were made, and people got wasted on any sorts of things. The fact that also the Greeks had to have a god entirely based around that also signifies how much they were into this kind of things.
At least they put in the effort to make the wine that they're getting wasted on.
Yep. It's again, it symbolizes also the pastoral thing, the collective effort which makes. Oh, there we go. The collective effort that ultimately gets rewarded with the pleasure, in this case of alcohol.
And I imagine you're always drunk. Not the donkey or whatever.
Yeah, donkey unicorn. Why don't has MLP done anything with that yet?
Do we have I don't think we've seen donkeys yet. We've seen horses, but not donkeys, I don't think.
No, I mean a donkey like unicorn.
But
No,
don't you
no.
see, Shiro? Donkeys are the losers of that particular animal kingdom.
Well, they kind
Don't
of
you
made
know?
the one horse we've seen in the show out to be like that.
Isn't that what the like? Keep in mind, sure, I'm seeing Josh Culture reviews here and there.
Sure,
Isn't that
sure.
what the recent season is going for? More like tackling the subtle racism that was only hinted in the other season.
Yes, although I will say Twilight is a terrible teacher.
What a surprise! What else is new?
That the show is on its 8th or 9th season, I think.
Again, if the SSMB topic is anything to go by, we're gonna reboot it eventually. But
Yeah,
again,
the
we're
rumors that we'll be getting a Gen 5 soon, but
I mean,
we're not here for
yeah.
this.
Yeah,
Mhm.
FIM is a fine enough show. I think, though, the magic of, oh my god, it's a gender-neutral show called My Little Pony is kind of worn off of it.
Oh.
I mean, it's still a good show, and from what I hear, the movie was actually a pretty good revival of sorts of interest.
By the way, another thing that it's kind of at least implied here, but it's a thing in Greek mythos. For Greek gods like that, if a thing had basically any kind of, sorry for the term, a hole in it, it was okay for them. Like, particularly Zeus, but we'll
Yeah.
get to him. Yeah, I think we're about to get to him, because apparently we need a party pooper. Seriously.
he's not happy with the noise we're making.
Seriously, Shiri, everything that's gonna happen now is it's him literally basically crashing the party because he was bored. How depressing must you be for in this kind of life?
If you're bored, then join the party. I
Not
don't
to
know.
mention, Zeus has way many other things to do to distract himself. Like, don't go if you're very squeamish. Don't go bother the origin mythos of Europe because it's an entire beast like that. Hello. So there you go. Since it's literally board, he says, "Hey, Hephaestus, give me some balls to throw at it." Now, this also fits the theme with what Beethoven was going for. Obviously, this in his original creation fits with a sudden storm ravaging the countryside for a bit. So basically, Disney interpreted this as Zeus fucking around. Look at that! Take seriously. I know that gods did not have very good relationship with each other, but that's ridiculous. Oh. No, not the wine. All that booze
Anything
wasted.
but the wine.
As South Park told us, red wine is the thing that you get drunk off the worst of it. So Fezzo is like, yeah, you want another one? But he's like, no, okay, I had my fun. Now I'm just gonna go to sleep. What a dick.
Peace
Well,
and quiet.
typical
So Fezzo is like,
Zeus.
oh, let me try this shit for a bit. And
Seems
you
like
just
fun.
nuke Phoebe, so probably. Seriously, what a dick.
He seemed
Yeah.
quite happy to be doing all that as well.
Yeah, that's pretty much in character with Zeus. Zeus was pretty much a gigantic scumbag. When it came down to
Well,
it.
not so much in the Hercules movie, but he's
No,
still a bit of an
obviously,
asshole
obviously
there.
they tone it down more heroically that way. Him and Hera, obviously. But yeah, that's pretty much what he was.
He's
He
still a
was
bit of an
the,
asshole there, though.
He was the ruler of Olympus and mankind, obviously, but that didn't mean that he couldn't have fun trolling around. But eventually, after, like any case, after any storm, the sun eventually had to go out again.
Thanks for the rainbow, Athena. Don't know why you're the one giving it.
Yeah, I don't remember if we're also keeping my mind. I'm a bit rusty on mythology right now, but I don't remember any particular deity tied to the rainbow.
Yeah, although that's clearly, at least that's the usual look people usually go for Athena, so...
Still save some wine.
Yes,
Rainbow wine
rainbow
time.
wine. That's gonna be. Oh, I know that some people managed, thanks to the temperature and everything, to create liquor mix, liquors based with the colors based on the rainbows.
Ah, yeah, moonshine as well.
And now this is just a good excuse to use filters.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, no pot of gold, I guess.
Ah. At least this means we won't get the Lucky Charms wrap.
Jesus.
Yeah, there's actually a wrap of that cereal now. Or was. I don't know if they killed off the wrap when many people really bemoaned it.
I'm just glad we don't have that much brand of cereals here in my country. Kellogg's is still a thing, though.
I mean, the mascots themselves aren't really
Ah,
bad.
there you go. Basically, symbolically, they salute Helios, transporting the sun on the other side of the planet. Not pictured, Kratos ripping his goddamn head off.
I'm sure Apollo will take his place. In fact, that's kind of usually Apollo's job, where Helios, for one reason or another,
Helios,
retires
yeah.
or dies, so then Apollo takes his place.
Yeah. That's actually one of the biggest mysteries of God of War. The fate of Apollo is completely unknown to this day. No one knows actually what happened to him.
Well, since Apollo's often portrayed as one of the more nicer gods, maybe he lived.
Yeah, my guess is that the writers didn't thought he could fit too much into the narrative, so they just left him. Otherwise, there you go. That's, I think, what was referenced eventually in Hercules. I forgot the name specifically, but a goddess that basically pulls her mantle, creating the night sky.
Weird. I thought that was actually a different god who did that as well. Wow.
Yeah. Still demonic, sorry.
Uh-huh.
And there we go. Artemis, basically, in this case, creating the stars for the night.
Yep. With her
Weird.
Artemis
Artemis is the goddess of the hunt. She's not mostly associated with the sky, if I recall.
I mean,
Well, there was an arrow.
I mean, Artemis is good with archery, and she's also the sister of Apollo, who's apparently also good with archery, in addition to having firepower.
And there you go. A random, tranquil day on Mount Olympus until Zeus decided to fuck things up.
Go figure.
Tough.
It's an awkward family to have, admittedly.
Yeah, now this is actually my least favorite of the segments. So keep in mind, it's not bad. La Gioconda by Poncelli. So basically Italian stuff. Uh, it's basically a recreation of actually a ballet using instead anthropomorphic animals.
Oh, of course, that explains it.
What?
Why it's not your favorite. Why it's your least favorite, sorry.
Not really that,
Eh.
not necessarily that, Pedro. Don't worry. No, don't worry. Let me handle this. No, not necessarily that, Pedro. It's the fact that the thing that they tell with this setting is not really particularly interesting to me.
Light, darkness.
Again,
I'm sure
it's
Disney will
more
never,
it's similar.
ever
It's
revolutionize the
actually
concepts.
it's actually a more it's actually a more traditional ballet, which means not much happens on screen. It's just some animals dancing around. Yay, I guess.
Oh, this one! Oh, goody. Yeah, this is an incredibly iconic
there are
one.
good comedy moments in this. I can see that. It's just still not enough for me to have, be a bit more higher on the list.
Basically, if you had to pick three shorts... Okay, if you had to pick the three bits from this that are probably the most iconic and most revitas and whatnot, one would definitely be The Sorcerer's Apprentice, the other would be, of course, Night on Bald Mountain, and then the third would be this one, because these characters show
Yeah.
up in quite a bit of Disney media for one reason or another.
Well, we're just that adaptable, I guess.
Yeah, in fact, I think some of these characters even got recycled for Robin Hood.
Yeah, so too. Well, again, remember, Robin Hood basically has a shit ton of recycled animations and everything from the movies. It's because of the period the Disney company was transitioning at the time.
Yeah. So yeah, concept of light and darkness. I'm sure we won't see Disney revolutionizing that concept now. But as for what form of light and darkness, well, it has to do with the light of innocence. Virginity, in a sense.
Tough.
Hello there.
Huh. Keep in mind, I haven't seen the original ballet or anything, so I know still very little about the source material of this particular piece. Again, even if it's an Italian composer and everything, it didn't particularly enthusiasm me as other foreigners may have been.
I guess
Italian compositions for theatrical purposes and everything have been, instead of just being musical, are more on the theater actual proper side with, for example, Goldoni's comedy.
makes sense. I guess in some cases, you could also argue that the reason this may be some people's least favorite is that this is kind of the short where nothing happens. Now, I know that's not saying much because essentially that's what most of these shorts are, but this is the one that definitely has, ironically, the least amount of story. Yes, even less than the one with the dancing flowers.
Well, it still fit the second category. It tells a story even if it's not a proper one or deep one,
I guess. I mean, I guess there's not as much transition, like, with the
Yeah.
Mount Olympus.
Oh no, in this case it's one group of animals after another dance. First the ostrich, now the hippos. Jesus.
Hmm.
Legs
what,
do not work like that.
Oh God, please no. Thank you. Yeah, that
Wow,
must
I
have
wonder if
been
Don
so
Bluth got
exhausting.
inspiration.
Like
I wonder.
4 minutes of dancing, and there you go. You're already this tired.
I wonder if Don Bluth got inspiration for that for the opening of Rockadoodle.
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 And now basically the rest of the segment is this hippo sleeping and seeing what happens around him. Here.
Yep, as the sun begins to set, darkness comes out, and so does mischievous.
Elephants, I guess. I guess we found the origins of the pink elephants on parade.
One thing to note is that all the animals up to this point have been feminine.
Hmm. Okay.
What?
I'm not sure how that works.
Don't question it.
You know
Yeah.
something's wrong when you've got the elephant in the room questioning it.
Literally. Jove, I guess we found the origin of the super resistant bubbles of Mr. Robbins.
Oh, and also that one bubble, too, from SpongeBob, but yeah.
Just take a photo of it.
That was one of the weirdest cases. Have a musical, have David Bowie guest star, have David
And
Bowie be
still have an
the
episode
only
that
one,
suck.
and yet have David Bowie be the only one who didn't sing a song in that musical.
Now, for some reason, the wind just basically lets the elephant fuck off. Okay, then.
Okay.
That's some strong wind.
Yep.
But the hippo is A-okay still.
As long as she's sleeping.
Completely oblivious
And
to
now
everything.
it's
As
nighttime.
night falls upon the stage.
A sewing circle this is not.
Not just that, it's very controversial potentially. But thankfully, we're deviating from that because I guess we need a romance story of all things to have now. Who's to say that Disney is not progressive?
Of course.
That was such a tuxedo mask entry, though.
Yeah.
My work here is done.
But you didn't
But
do
you
anything
didn't do
yet.
anything!
Whoosh. I guess love can bloom into the deepest battlefield.
Although she doesn't see it that way, clearly.
Either she's playing hard to get, or this is a game of Pepe Le Pew. Eh? Oh no!
Ow.
Oh,
Never mind! I guess she's okay with it. He's gonna suffer the consequences, though.
Well, it's little meaning of doing anything for love.
Yes.
And now it's time for the segment once again to go completely apeshit. I guess it's climax theory time or anything.
So while she's having fun with him, the evil ones are still around.
Yeah.
I don't think they ever left.
Yeah. Artistic.
Yep. It's still going.
Okay.
Jesus.
Well, they have to go until the end of the music too.
No, I mean that the poor gator was still trying to dislodge the elephant. And there you go. This, for some reason, breaks the entire theater. Okay then.
Yay! Property damage!
So I hope you had fun, kids, because now it's time to get you scared some more.
It's time for the grand
Now,
finale.
this is the most ingenious thing, as we mentioned. The fact that it's two pieces combined and they're completely different from each other, from completely different composers and made in completely different times, but they have one just single thing in common. One ends with the same identical note and instruments when the other begins. And Disney took this to a T.
Yep.
Yeah, back in the day, obviously Disney wanted to make the bad guy of the first segment properly the devil. Later on, they just basically kind of retconned into him with the name Chernabog, which is based on Krnibog, a demon in Slavic culture. It's still very demonic, obviously.
It's okay, though. He's afraid of the dark as much as you are.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, this is the last thing I think of Leopold, so bye.
Yeah, I think, yeah. After this, the movie will end.
Yeah.
No segments, no nothing.
Now, the original composition of Item Ball Mountain is not too much different. It's basically a bunch of, if I recall correctly, it's a bunch of witches summoning the Sabbath. I think so. I don't remember entirely. So the allusions with the satanic themes is just still there. It's just Disney basically go probably the darkest it has been in all its history. Like, I don't get me wrong, Jova. In terms of theme, obviously, there is always being something that's deeply more dark. This is the darkest in terms of visuals and on surface level. It's literally the devil harvesting the souls of innocents under his mountain.
Well, to anyone who had nightmares because of him, don't worry, you can get your revenge on him in the Kingdom Hearts series.
Yes. It's a shame that the battle in 3D is so downplayed, because the one in the original is so perfect.
Yeah. Wow! Boy, this town really has it bad.
Yep.
Kinda sucks when your neighbor is Chernabog.
I'm still surprised human wants to live. But yeah, that means any kind of soul is accepted for this kind of party. In this case, the fallen knights. But unfortunately, also the ones who died normally and were entombed in a regular cemetery.
Yep.
This basically tells that in this case you're not safe from a thing like this.
It helps that the animation feels a bit unnatural, seeing still images
they use a particular
waved around
technique.
like
Not
that.
all the souls have this, like for example, this one is traditionally animated, but others are basically just impressed on the film. So yeah, since now we seem to have enough souls, we can finally start the party. Yay!
How fitting! What is quite possibly the darkest Disney villain, and yes, he did later get counted as an official Disney villain, is the guy who has possibly the most, nonchalant goal when you get down to it?
Well, keep in mind, he's still malicious as we see, but at the end of the day, that's just what happens.
There's a mugging face if ever I've seen one
That's
before.
charming. Discarded like cheap toys in a matter of seconds.
Yep. I wonder if they're ever going to explain what the heck Chernobog's deal even is in the Kingdom Hearts series, because he's still kind of just there every time.
Yeah, he's not an artless, I can tell you that. None of the entries, nor any of the characters ever bother to mention. He's not an artless properly, so it counts as. But it's probably a pure manifestation of darkness. That's the most gist of it. It's similar to Hades in that kind of regard. It's part of darkness, but not necessarily associated with the darkness going around in Kingdom Hearts franchise.
Weirdly enough, in the Japanese version of Kingdom Hearts, he was given the traditional
Music,
boss theme. As
That's
opposed
because
to this...
Shimomura had not developed yet the proper theme to it, but in the American release, and a European obviously, an international one onward, he did add it.
And as you can see, another of his abilities, he can pretty much corrupt a soul into being, well...
multiple things.
Yeah.
From demoness to a grotesque creature to worshipping servants. So that's charming.
Okay, Chern, who are you bragging to? Although, how much you want to bet they're actually going to give him a motive in Kingdom Hearts 3 if he does
if he
come
shows
back to
up. Well, possibly, I guess. I'm fine either way. As long as there's a decent boss fight with it, sure.
Well, there's gonna be nipples in a moment.
Oh, yes.
that. Haven't we already seen...
No, not yet, Jova, don't worry.
So let me get this. Let me get this straight, Disney. Like, you don't have a problem with showing nipples on. Oh,
There you go.
There you go.
Right in your
yeah,
face, too.
This is still rated G, right?
It's the. So how come the sunflower was cut, but that wasn't?
I particularly appreciate this final thing, which it ends in the most alien way. With the gong, which was never used in a black and white shot. That was powerful.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the good party needs to end. Yes, it's a bit of a bummer, but you need to let go. Come on. It's like, who the fuck called the police?
You filled your asshole quota for today. Come on.
Time to reel it in. The cops.
Possibly the saddest facepalm in Disney history.
Yeah.
And there you go. Even with the most malicious things that happen, eventually the souls have to return to their rightful place.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, what is being depicted is it's something like some sort of ritual thing that happens every couple of years. I think that's what they established. But while being extremely malicious, ultimately doesn't change the fate of the souls. It basically just rustles them for a while.
Got to wonder what the citizens must have thought of this all.
Yeah.
And again, anyone with the gumption to live by what clearly looks to be practically a
There you
graveyard
go. We're
itself.
about to get position proper. There you go. This is where the segment ends, and it starts the next one. The Ave Maria of Schubert.
Mm-hmm. And with that, the villain is defeated.
And becomes the summit of the mountain once more. For the next, I guess, 100 years or something.
Mm-hmm. You know, a funny common misconception is that Mickey's actually the hero who fights Chernobog. Like, that's what I was told.
That reminds me, Pedro, wasn't there a Sega Genesis game made with this?
Yes, and it sucked balls. It was
Yeah, you told me that it sucked. Like, how was it that bad? Was it like a side-scroller?
Yes, it was so terrible. Like I said in our Aladdin commentary, it was so terrible that Disney was horrified, and that's why they took more creative reins when it comes to the video games made out of their properties, which is why we got stuff where Disney animators would do the animation for stuff.
So I wonder what went wrong with it.
It was a really bad game. The controls were bad. The level design was generic as all hell. The collision detection was terrible. It was just an incredibly uninspired, generic 2D platformer, which, considering it's based on the most creative animated film ever created, it's insulting.
Yeah, I agree.
So funny. In this movie, we have both a short revolving around science and another
Basically,
revolving around religion here.
I'll tell you more later. Go ahead, Pedro.
Basically, it's the Disney license game that Disney wants you to forget it exists.
Mm-hmm. That's the thing, Jova. I honestly think that Walt Disney did this basically to please everyone. That's, I guess, the main.
No
But I would say that regardless of that, I honestly agree with what Doug Walker had to say about this subject. Even if you're not too much of a region person, I think you can appreciate the artistic value. For example, Pedro, you are basically the most atheist out of all of us. What's your take on this? Do you think it's
I don't have a problem with movies that have. I mean, I love Prince of Egypt. I love Ten Commandments. I don't have a problem with film that has.
No, don't worry. I didn't want it to be provocatory with that question. What I wanted to ask is, do you think the nature of this hinders too much the artistic value of it?
Not really. I mean, all this is doing is spelling out the basic Christian myths that were still incredibly prevalent in American society at the time this movie was made. So this is a part of its time. There's no real reason for
me. This is another product that was slightly changed in the end.
I mean, if this movie. It's another example of a movie being a part of its time. Because if this movie was made today, probably this segment would never get made because there's no way Disney would just take a side and do something like this. They would just be as neutral as they possibly can, so they don't piss anybody off.
Well, honestly, I mean, I think that's what they're doing here, being neutral. I mean, we had one that's around the scientific period, and then we've got religion here.
The process was originally supposed to enter at the end in an actual church with a complete shot of a Virgin Mary, basically.
Not to mention,
they basically cut away because they wanted the movie to be shown in non-Christian countries like Arabic.
Makes sense.
Not to mention, Teo, this particular finale is balanced out by gaining in a lot of good points for that massive big fuck you to creationism in that previous segment anyway.
Yeah. Again, it's something to basically please everyone. And I honestly think it's kind of also the best way to end the movie in general.
Yeah.
It's both somber, quiet, but at the same time has kind of like an imposing tone to it. It's completely I know it's not a very good comparison, but I think this is kind of the opposite of what happens near the end of the Three Caballeros. The Three Caballeros, I really loved it as a movie, and I still love it now. But I think the last couple of minutes of the third act kind of drags just a bit, and you don't really care by the end of the movie, which ends in this bombastic way and then just stops. I think it could have done with a not obviously with the Rachel's thing, but with a more relatively subdued kind of ending. But again, we'll get to that movie one day or another.
That reminds me,
The
Gio,
primary
have you
thing-
seen the new TV show, The Three Caballeros?
No, I'm curious, though. I'm really curious.
What it really boils down to is that you can do anything you want, but you have to make it primarily available as a good film, which is what Prince of Egypt and Commandment and this movie are.
True
If,
that.
now, if someone makes a schlocky piece of shit like the God's Not Dead movies, then of course I'm going to call them pieces of shit, because they are pieces of shit. They could make a movie like that agrees with all of my values, and I'll still think it's a pile of donkey dick.
So basically the usual Seth MacFarlane stuff these days?
Well, that's the thing, Joe. But honestly, the whole Seth MacFarlane's biggest problem isn't even that to me. It's more so the fact that the guy just completely lost any sense of his humanity, and at this point is nothing but a fucking asshole just for the sake of being an asshole.
Now, another thing, the original piece is usually sung in German, I think. I don't know if this one was English or not, but it wouldn't surprise me because it needed to be accessible to the people in theater. And there you go. That's basically the last shot of the movie.
Uplifting, bright, and hopeful.
And again, yeah, it basically says that even after the darkest night, there's the brightest day, as DC will tell. Now, the VHS that I had as for the title screen had also the orchestra basically tucking off after this, but this one doesn't have credits. But so basically, final thoughts time.
The movie, when as it was made originally, was made specifically with no credits whatsoever for the sake of simulating the fact that you're watching a concert.
It's a shame because honestly, I think these artists needed to be credited in some fashion because of their amazing work. But alas, who wants to go first?
I'll go.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's a nice musical masterpiece, now. Obviously, the censorship thing and trying to pretend like some things didn't happen aside, that is kind of a dickish thing to do, to pretend that didn't happen, Disney. We're not gonna let that one go. But that out of the way. This was a very, very creative project, and being a musician myself, one I can appreciate. Adapting music to music. Adapting animation to music. Like, beyond just the typical having music in the background. No. More like the music was the main star of the film, and the animation was the background. A bit backwards in some sense, but still pretty good. It had a nice variety in the ideas. The animation, of course, was top-notch for the time, and the little bits of quirks and bits of humor, some unintentional in the live-action skits, were nice and well done. If I were to say my favorite short, that would be a tough one. That would either be The Sorcerer's Apprentice, obviously, Night on Bald Mountain, or, believe it or not, the Animals one. Those three are traded for my favorite. And go figure, they're the most recognizable one. Although special mention does go to the Summertime sketch with the flowers. Because I'm a sucker for Trey Puck. But yeah, the music is also top-notch. And yeah, it's just a very well-put idea. Sadly, one that didn't make much money because of the time it was released. Gee, imagine that, Disney releasing something at not the best of times. So we'd have to wait a while for a sequel. And what a sequel we got in 2000. More on that
We'll get to
later.
that.
But yeah,
I
good
suppose
fun.
it's particularly difficult to live up to something like this.
Obviously, big shoes to fill and everything.
Yeah, let's just say good, great, fun musical movie. I recommend you see it.
All right, Pedro.
Well, obviously, if there ever was an animated film that's fitting the description of work of art as this one, this is basically a Disney animation at its artistic peak. It's not my favorite Disney movie because while it is an impressive piece of animation and fantastic use of classical music, it's the kind of movie that it's good to watch sometimes, but it's not as rewatchable as some other Disney films. It's when in terms of objective terms, obviously it's the best they've made. I don't think it's the best. Well, okay, most people think it's the best they've made. I don't personally think it's the best they've made because while it is a fantastic film, I don't think it's the kind of film that it doesn't have that much depth in terms of the actual. How should I put this? Not story because there's no story.
Depth.
It's more like
Well, maybe not depth, but like actual.
Accessibility.
It doesn't. No, not accessibility, and it's not even that too. This movie would be a lot more popular with kids today than back then because kids nowadays love watching montages and set to music and stuff and music videos and stuff like that. This would be a lot better understood today than back then. But the point is, it doesn't have that much substance in terms of actual content or food for thought. It's more so like a spectacle. Like it's like again, it's like you're watching a concert. You're just there for the spectacle, and spectacle is nice. But at the same time, the fact that the movie is just all spectacle can be a bit in that. Okay, it's great for what it wants to do. It's just that it's not the movie that gives me the most for my money. I still hold Zootopia as my personal pick for the best movie this studio has ever made, because while it doesn't have the artistic merits and the creativity of this movie, it does a good job in being overall much has a lot of substance and much more to say. And even then, it even does the whole again, like I've said before, it's probably one of the first Disney movies since this one to take a definitive political stance.
I wouldn't say they took a
not
definitive
necessarily
political stance.
Joe Pedro, more like, but at least in not interfering, but picking a side on maybe a debate going on at the moment.
Well, that's what I'm
I
saying.
don't think they even really picked a side because they showed both sides, if anything.
True, I guess. I guess it's.
Well, they did pick a side in the creationism versus science debate. At least that they definitely picked science over creationism in that particular segment.
Not
they did
only
pick
that,
a side.
Jova, hold on, Jova. I honestly think it's a thing that should have been seen from the perspective of the people at the time, and I honestly think it's a bit rough for us of this new generation to. Guessing what was going on in terms of that kind of a debate around the time. We know how things were as they were passed on by our grandfathers and so on, but we don't know how the climate specifically was. We didn't know exactly how people felt with this kind of thing. But yeah, continue, Pedro.
To give an idea, my favorite movie and my personal pick for the best movie ever made is 2001: A Space Odyssey. Was clearly highly inspired by this movie in a lot of ways. Taking classical music and making your movie fit that particular pre-composed piece of music. Because 2001 pretty much took what this movie did, and I think took it to the next step. 2001 has all the cool, awesome spectacle, awesome visual spectacle combined with beautiful music that this movie does, while at the same time offering a bit more food for thought, specifically in the Owl segment, to the point where the movie does manage to match its spectacle with a great amount of substance as well. Whereas this movie, while I do appreciate the artistic merits of it, it's not the kind of movie that I would watch over and over. It's great to watch once in a while, don't get me wrong, but I wouldn't say it's again, it's probably the best film that for most people that Disney's made. And yes, of course, it's.
I didn't even
great.
know that.
Well, most people argue that this is Disney's animation studios at their peak, and I can see why. Don't get me wrong. It's just that I think the movie could have had a bit more substance with what it was doing. Like, imagine if, for example, we had a bit more. Okay, let me put it like this. The whole history of the world, history of the creation of the universe segment, and the Chernobyl segments, because those are, to me, the best ones.
Oh, really?
Those are definitely the ones that, to me, have the most
story.
Not stories, more like thematic depth. Thematic depth. Imagine if the entire movie was like that. Like, for example, replace that segment with the anthropomorphic animals, which is basically just nothing but fluff.
Yeah.
and replace it with something a bit more thematic. Like if the whole
Funny
movie,
enough, Pedro, there was supposed to be originally a segment based on the Rise of the Valkyrie, involving one thing, some sort of a abridged version of The Hobbit.
I
That
would
would've
have
been
preferred that.
interesting.
I would have. While I'm not a fan of Tolkien's work, I would have preferred that over that fluffy crocodile and hippopotamus thingy. That's just basically kind of a waste of our time. I mean, it looks and sounds nice, but I don't
It's
know.
a-
Like,
I consider it a fun waste of our time, but yeah, I mean, if you're looking
It's
for
definitely the
story,
weakest part of this movie.
I'm
yeah.
not looking for story. I'm looking for thematic depth because you don't need story to have thematic depth. And I feel the Chernobog and the creationism science segment did have that, and I wanted the whole movie to be like that. The movie peaked in those two segments, and the rest of the segments kind of pale in comparison to me.
Although, admittedly, I
So-
guess it's a good thing that it peaked with the Chernobog one because that's technically the last one.
True, but I kind of wish the whole movie was like that. If the whole movie was like that, I probably would have even preferred this over 2001, maybe.
I guess I
But
can see
as
why
it
they
is,
wouldn't have the
it's-
whole movie be like that for the sake of variety, and eventually maybe toning things down. Having things be a bit gentler, softer, or whatnot.
I know, but if you're gonna go full, artistic and deep, just go all the way, go all out, like because like I said, the crocodile hippopotamus thing, that feels like something you'd see in a silly symphony, not in an
Yeah.
artistic, bombastic, groundbreaking film that this is supposedly trying to be.
Again, I argue that they have all these different ranges and whatnot, just for the sake of, having something for everyone who may like their stuff smaller or better contained. Let's also not forget that animation back in the day was something that some people were getting a bit used to, especially with long movies, when most people were used to like shorter segments or whatnot. So I can see why they would have had some things be like this or that. It was sort of probably the best way to have people adapt to it by having something that everyone could be familiar
Not
with.
only that, my guess that segment, yes, it's the weakest, but it was made specifically also for basically the children, the youngest in the audience.
That too, yeah. I
Well,
mean,
a bit weird when it was near the end, though, but whatever.
yeah.
Continue unless you're finished, Pedro.
So yeah, basically, it's a work of art and a fantastic movie overall. I just think it's a bit unbalanced in the sense that it feels like it was made by different groups of people who had completely different visions, and all the segments were mashed together. And I kind of wish like it was made in a bit more of a consistent tone and theme, rather than just be a complete mishmash of different segments that don't really compare with each other. Like, it just feels like five. How many are there? 6, 7. The point is, it feels like a bunch of unrelated segments that were made for completely different purposes, strung together. And I guess you can argue that was the point, but I still think it kind of makes the movie a bit uneven and inconsistent in tone and atmosphere.
So
But that's
would you
just-
say that Fantasia 2000 did it better?
We'll
No,
see.
I don't really care for Fantasia 2000, but
We'll
that's
get
a topic for
to
another
we'll get
day.
to that movie another time, Jova. Don't worry. There's another opinion of it. Shiri.
Well, going back to something that Pedro was saying, I think another reason as to why, not many people would probably go back to this movie pretty frequently is because it's one of those things you have to, to an extent, pay quite a bit of attention to.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't want to watch a movie to, kind of relax and not pay very close attention to it. So that's another thing. It's something that can be appreciated once in a while.
I could definitely see where you're coming from, because, as a kid, the very first time I saw this, I mainly came for, the Mickey short, because that's all I really knew about this, and that's really the character I knew. Now, to be fair, I guess this is kind of a hindsight, foresight thing. But yeah, looking back, I mean, okay, I'm actually more entertained by this movie as an adult than I was as a kid, admittedly.
Well, you have a general idea of what's going on a bit more than you would as a child, although, as I think was evident throughout this commentary, I think each of us, found something different to appreciate when we did watch this when we were a lot younger that wasn't necessarily likely aimed for us, like the
Yeah.
hippos and stuff. Like, I
In terms
barely
of-
remember that one, honestly.
Yeah.
2001 was made specifically just for adults, and I would argue that the reason it's much easier for me, for example, me personally, that movie to grab me more is because it actually does have the thematic depth behind its spectacle. Whereas this, like I said, for the most part, it's spectacle, so it can be a bit devoid of substance in some aspects.
How much you want to bet that if this movie had been a success, that the sequels would have been much more deep on thematic depth? Like,
Now, keep in mind, Trova, again, this was a success. It's just that the
I imagine
circumstances
it
at the
was-
time did not allow Disney to have this multi-part franchise.
Also,
true.
I imagine that the amount of money that it would have taken to even make this, I imagine
Yeah,
was very
exactly
hard
like
to
I
actually
said.
make that money back.
It would have been a monster, but it would require so much money all the time, and it would have bloated too much to gain enough money eventually. So Disney just decided to cut this off and repurpose it. Again, it did not wasted all of the sketches, but some of them were repurposed for movies like Make My Music, and I still actually appreciate those, even if they're basically diet version of this movie. So,
I guess the
It's
thing
nice to see them become something.
Yeah, I guess the thing I consider is like, well, if some of these do feel like they're lacking on thematic depth, I think this movie just feels definitely like it was an experiment. Like, they didn't want to go all too deep in. So I wonder if, like, well, if this had been made in, say, more modern times, and they'd had the funds to make a series of sequels, do you think maybe then we'd have had more thematical depth?
A series of
Possibly.
animated shorts.
possibly. But again, this is what happened in this timeline, so that's what we're gonna have to take for it.
Still got
Anyway,
a great
Right.
movie out of it, and well,
what's your favorite segment?
that one would,
The pastoral, I guess.
yes, and I think there may have been another one, although I'm not entirely sure.
Mine
I
is
do like the
Chernobog.
flowers.
Chernobog all the way.
Oh, okay. So basically,
I'm a big sucker. I'm a big sucker for
And
that
the
on the Bald
Mickey, the
Mountain.
Mickey short, obviously.
All right then. No, don't worry, Shiro. It's fine. All right, you're done.
I think so. There isn't really a lot to say that hasn't already been said, because
Sure.
despite its spectacle, this is kind of, an easy thing to talk about at its core.
Yep.
All right, that leaves me. When like I said, I used to watch this movie as a kid a lot of time. Apparently, all my family was involved in, not in terms of just my parents. Like due to different reasons, I have a shitload of cousins. That's how my family is, and a lot
So
of
do I.
them were around. A lot of them were around my age, and so back when I was in vacation, when I was a kid, during the July-August period, basically all us kids were just be thrown in the corner with the TV and be gone quiet watching movies. And
Yeah.
this was one that popped up regularly, actually. They also mean that a couple of my cousins also were scared shit for their lives. But anyway, yeah, I always had some kind of appreciation for this movie since I was a kid. Obviously, not as, in terms of value as I may have as an adult. When I was a kid, my favorite segment was still Rite of Spring, but it was because they're dinosaurs, and that was literally it. As an adult, I also appreciate the music and the contrast with it. But in that sense, I appreciate the music in all the movie, in all the segment, even if I may have La Gioconda as my least favorite. It's still great and serviceable on its own. That's the strength of the movie. Even at its weakest, it's still really that serviceable. At the same time, obviously, it's not accessible. Just because me and my cousins watched it all the time as kids, that doesn't mean it would have been accessible to all kids of the age that I was around then. I can understand that it's a heavy movie, especially as a follow-up to Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and Pinocchio, which even if they were also heavy on some themes, they were still relatively fine as kids' movie. This one was very different in that kind of regard. It was clearly more appreciative for adults, especially because of the music involved. The concerts were a thing where adults were mostly going, so it makes sense. That thought process is there. But it is one of my favorite Disney movies. I don't think it's my absolute favorite, but then again, I don't really have like an absolute favorite I will pick around everyone. It's just more like a bunch of them that I really, really, really appreciate over everything else. Basically, which some of them are basically Hercules, Treasure Planet, Emperor's New Groove, or Atlantis. Other than this, but I still really have a fond appreciation of this. I agree that it's not a thing that you should watch around all the time, but once in a while it's far enough. And even with some of its dated content, even with the censor thing, which again, like we basically told, it doesn't really make sense to this day. You kind of need to have some balls of steel for this Disney, especially because of what happened to James Gunn recently. But aside from that, the movie is indeed really that powerful as an artistic level, and as such also is heavy to digest, even for the most stoic of people. As such, again, it's recommended to see it once in a while, or anything, but it still is a great movie and definitely one of my top. Anyway, that's it for the first Fantasia. We'll see either for Fantasia 2000 or one of those diet movies that I mentioned, like Make My Music. See ya.
See ya.
See ya.